He's our final act of the night. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Paul Potts.
When a shy mobile phone salesman wearing a cheap Tesco suit walked onto the Britain's Got Talent stage in 2007, nobody expected what was about to happen. What came next would change television history forever, and what happened to Paul Potts after his victory will leave you absolutely speechless. From bullied schoolboy to global opera sensation performing for queens and presidents, Paul's journey took turns that even Simon Cowell never saw coming. But behind the standing ovations and platinum records lies a story of struggle, redemption, and a voice that refused to be silenced. This is the remarkable story of a man who went from £30,000 in debt to selling millions of albums worldwide, from a cramped terraced house in Bristol to performing over 1,500 concerts across 45 countries. A man who almost gave up on his dream completely, who hadn't sung in years, who was recovering from a devastating bicycle accident when he decided to take one last chance. Join us as we tell you what really happened to Paul Potts from Britain's Got Talent. Paul Robert Potts was born on October 13, 1970, in the working-class neighborhood of Kingswood, Bristol. The second of 4 children, Paul grew up in a Victorian terraced house in the Fish Ponds area, raised by his father Roland, a hard-working bus driver, and his mother Yvonne, a supermarket cashier. From the very beginning, music was Paul's sanctuary. He sang in the choir at Chester Park Junior School and performed with several Bristol churches, including Christ Church. But singing wasn't just a hobby for young Paul, it was his lifeline, his escape from a childhood filled with torment that would shape him for years to come. The bullying started when Paul was just 7 years old and didn't stop until he was 18. Day after day, year after year, he endured relentless taunting from his classmates. They called him cruel names like Smelly, Potty, and Wee Wee. Some bullies mockingly called him Pol Pot, after the brutal dictator. Sometimes as many as 8 bullies would wait for him after school and beat him up. Paul would try to change his route home, but it wasn't always possible, so he just endured the physical abuse. His teeth were broken when he ran into scaffolding while fleeing from bullies, one tooth going up behind his nose. He became so self-conscious about his crooked teeth that he was afraid to smile. Paul was threatened that the beatings would get worse if he told anyone, but eventually he ran out of ways to explain the bruises to his parents. When his mother went to the school to address the issue, nothing changed. The teachers advised him to ignore the bullying, assuring him it would go away eventually, but it never did. Things escalated to a point where young Paul contemplated ending it all, even considering throwing himself down the stairs, not to commit suicide, he later explained, but because he wanted people to feel an emotion toward him that wasn't hate, even if it was just sympathy. Through all of this darkness, Paul had one true friend, his voice. Singing became his way out, his escape from the tormentors. When he sang, he could lose himself in his own little world, where the vicious words of his bullies were replaced by hauntingly beautiful lyrics and melodies that lifted his heart and spirit. At 16, everything changed when he heard La Bohème for the first time. Paul fell deeply in love with opera, a romance that would set him on a turbulent journey for decades to come. He later discovered Tchaikovsky's Pathétique Symphony and became entranced by Puccini and the raw emotion of Italian music. Music wasn't just something Paul enjoyed, it was his reason for surviving. After leaving school in 1987, Paul took on various jobs at Waitrose, Tesco, and Debenhams to support himself. Despite financial hardships, his passion for music remained constant. In 1993, he earned a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in humanities from University College Plymouth St. Mark and St. John. From 1996 to 2003, he served as a Liberal Democrat councillor for Bristol City Council, becoming the youngest member at the time. But all the while, Paul pursued his true love, opera. From 1999 to 2003, Paul performed in amateur opera productions, taking on roles with Bath Opera and Southgate Opera Company in London. He cycled from Bristol to Bath in all weathers, arriving panting and sweating for his singing lessons with teacher Ian Comboy, but he would still sing like an angel. He paid for every lesson himself, dedicated every spare moment to his craft. He even saved up to attend a singing masterclass in Italy with the legendary Pavarotti. But Paul never earned a penny from his performances. He was a true amateur, singing purely for the love of it. Then tragedy struck. In 2003, doctors discovered Paul had a benign adrenal tumor while treating him for a burst appendix. He was placed in a high-dependency ward while they removed it. Shortly after the tumor surgery, while he was still recovering, Paul had a bicycle accident that shattered his collarbone and left him with whiplash. He was off work for 2 years. The medical bills piled up. The financial troubles became overwhelming. Paul and his wife Julianne, whom he had met in an internet chat room in 2001 and married in May 2003, found themselves drowning in debt, more than £30,000 in the hole. Singing was the last thing on Paul's mind. He hadn't sung in 4 years. His dream of becoming an opera singer seemed completely dead. Paul took a job as a manager at Carphone Warehouse in Bridgend, Wales, selling mobile phones to pay the bills. It was a world away from the opera stages he had once dreamed of. At 36 years old, overweight, with crooked teeth and lacking in confidence from years of bullying and setbacks, Paul felt insignificant, defeated. But his wife, Julianne, never stopped believing in him. She saw something in Paul that he couldn't see in himself. When Britain's Got Talent announced auditions for their very first series in 2007, Julianne encouraged Paul to take one last chance. He was planning to quit music entirely if he lost. It was do or die. One chance to make his dream come true, or walk away forever. On March 17, 2007, Paul Potts walked nervously onto the stage at the Wales Millennium Centre in Cardiff. The auditorium held 2,000 people. Sitting behind the judges' table were Simon Cowell, the legendary music executive who created the show, journalist Piers Morgan, and actress Amanda Holden. This was the very first series of Britain's Got Talent, and nobody knew quite what to expect. The atmosphere was electric with possibility. Paul shuffled onto the stage awkwardly, almost apologetically, wearing his now infamous 35-pound Tesco suit. He looked uncomfortable, out of place. The audience could sense his nervousness. When Ant and Dec asked him what he was going to do, Paul replied in a quiet voice that he was going to sing opera. Simon Cowell groaned audibly and rolled his eyes. Piers Morgan smirked. You could hear snickers rippling through the crowd. People in the audience exchanged skeptical glances. This nervous, ordinary-looking mobile phone salesman was going to sing opera? Really? Paul stood there, sweating, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. He later described himself as shaking like jelly. But then the music began. The opening notes of Giacomo Puccini's Nessun Dorma filled the auditorium. Paul closed his eyes, and in that moment everything changed. From the very first note that floated from his mouth, it was clear that something magical was happening. The snickers stopped instantly. The smirks vanished from the judges' faces. Simon Cowell's expression transformed from skeptical to stunned. Amanda Holden's hand flew to her mouth. Piers Morgan sat up straight in his chair, his eyes wide with disbelief. Paul's powerful tenor voice soared through the hall, hitting every note with precision and emotion that seemed impossible from this unassuming man. When Paul sang, he went to a totally different place, the nerves vanishing completely. For 3.5 minutes, the mobile phone salesman from Bristol transported everyone in that room to another world. The audience sat in complete silence, mesmerized. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others held up their phones, desperately trying to capture this unbelievable moment. As Paul hit the final triumphant notes, the entire audience of 2,000 people erupted. They leaped to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. The judges stood, too. Amanda Holden had tears pouring down her cheeks. It was the first time viewers had seen her cry on the show, fresh and genuine emotion that would become her trademark in years to come. Simon Cowell, rarely at a loss for words, stood there with his mouth open in shock. When he finally spoke, he said simply, "We were not expecting that. That was incredible, simply magical." Piers Morgan leaned forward and said, "I think you may just win this entire competition." Amanda, still crying, told Paul that his voice had left her covered in goosebumps. The three judges gave Paul 3 emphatic yeses, but more than that, they gave him hope. When Paul stopped singing, his heart was racing because he had absolutely no idea what the judges were going to say. The relief and joy on his face when he heard their praise was absolutely beautiful to witness. Backstage, Paul hugged Julianne, both of them crying tears of disbelief and happiness. After years of struggle, after giving up on his dream, after 4 years of not singing at all, Paul Potts had just delivered one of the most stunning auditions in television history. The performance was uploaded to YouTube, where it would eventually rack up over 199 million views, becoming one of the most watched audition videos of all time. But the journey was far from over. As Paul's audition aired on television on June 9, 2007, he became an overnight sensation. Social media exploded with praise. Viewers across the United Kingdom were calling it the best audition they had ever seen. Paul's story resonated with millions: the bullied kid, the working-class man with a dream, the underdog who refused to give up. Everyone was rooting for him. But success always brings scrutiny, and Paul was about to face his biggest challenge yet. Just before the Britain's Got Talent final, controversy erupted. The media discovered that Paul wasn't quite the undiscovered amateur the show had portrayed. Journalists uncovered that he had performed with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra and had plans for a summer tour with them. He had appeared in leading roles in 4 amateur opera productions. He had attended a masterclass in Italy. Critics accused the show of being a fix, of Paul being an experienced performer reaping the benefit of professional training while pretending to be just a simple mobile phone salesman. The backlash was intense. Some viewers felt betrayed. The accusations threatened to derail everything Paul had worked for. Paul and his former singing teacher, Ian Comboy, fought back against the claims. They explained the truth. Yes, Paul had taken singing lessons, but he had paid for every single one himself. Yes, he had performed in amateur productions, but he had never earned a single penny from singing. He hadn't even received petrol money. He was, by every definition, an amateur. He had never worked as a professional singer. Everything he had done for the love of music, not for money. The controversy gradually blew over as the truth emerged, but it had taken its toll on Paul's confidence. He had spent his whole life feeling unworthy. And now those old wounds were being reopened. For someone who had been bullied for 11 years straight, the public criticism was devastating. But Paul had survived worse. He had his voice. He had Julianne's unwavering belief, and he had come too far to give up now. On June 14, 2007, Paul took the stage for the semi-final. The pressure was immense. This was his chance to prove the critics wrong, to show everyone that he deserved to be there. He chose to perform the main verses of Time to Say Goodbye by Andrea Bocelli, a song that held deep personal meaning. As the first notes filled the studio, Paul poured every ounce of emotion into his performance. His voice soared, powerful and pure, silencing every doubt and every criticism. The audience was on their feet before he even finished. Simon, Piers, and Amanda stood applauding, their faces showing genuine admiration. The public vote was decisive. Paul received the highest number of votes of any act that night, advancing him straight to the final. Social media erupted again with predictions that Paul would win the entire competition. The criticism faded away, replaced by overwhelming support. The final arrived on June 17, 2007. Paul was up against fierce competition, including 6-year-old singer Connie Talbot, who had become a co-favorite with bookmakers. The stakes couldn't be higher: £100,000 in prize money and the opportunity to perform at the Royal Variety performance in front of Queen Elizabeth II. For his final performance, Paul returned to the song that had started it all, Nessun Dorma. This time he performed the full version, every powerful note building to the triumphant conclusion. The performance was breathtaking. When Paul hit the final note, the audience went absolutely wild. 2 million people across the United Kingdom picked up their phones to vote. When hosts Ant and Dec announced the results, Paul Potts had won. He had received the highest percentage of the 2 million votes cast. The mobile phone salesman from Bristol, the bullied kid who almost gave up on life, The man who hadn't sung in 4 years had just won the very first series of Britain's Got Talent. Paul stood on that stage, overwhelmed with emotion, hardly able to believe what was happening. He performed an encore of Nessun Dorma, his voice filled with joy and triumph. Backstage, he and Julianne held each other and cried. They looked at each other in disbelief, unable to comprehend that their lives had just changed forever. But winning was just the beginning of Paul's incredible journey. Within days of his victory, he was profiled on National Public Radio's Day-to-Day program in the United States. He appeared live on NBC's Today Show, bringing his story to millions of Americans. On July 16, 2007, just 1 month after winning, Paul's debut album, One Chance, was released in the United Kingdom. 1 week later, it claimed the #1 spot on the UK album chart. The album didn't just succeed in Britain. It topped the charts in 13 countries simultaneously. By December 2007, Prime Minister Gordon Brown personally presented Paul with a platinum disc for having sold over 2 million copies. 2 million copies in less than 6 months. It was an astounding achievement. Paul took a 6-month sabbatical from his job at Carphone Warehouse, but by March 2008, it was clear he wouldn't be going back. He resigned via email, trading his manager position for a career as a professional opera singer. In January 2008, Paul embarked on his first world tour, originally planned for 50 stops. The demand was so overwhelming that it expanded to 97 concerts across 85 cities in 23 countries. Paul performed in front of 69,000 people before a German football match. He sang at prestigious venues across Europe, Asia, and beyond. He appeared twice on The Oprah Winfrey Show, where Oprah celebrated how his Britain's Got Talent audition had become one of the most viewed videos on YouTube, with over 92 million views at that time. On December 3, 2007, Paul stood on the stage of the Royal Variety performance and sang Nella Fantasia in front of Queen Elizabeth II. The boy who had been bullied and beaten, who had felt worthless and insignificant, was now performing for royalty. It was a moment of profound redemption. In July 2008, Deutsche Telekom began using Paul's Britain's Got Talent performance in television and cinema advertisements across Germany. Japanese television used him in commercials for throat medicine. He received 2 nominations at the Echo Awards 2009 in Germany for Best International Male Artist and Album of the Year. Paul was becoming a household name from Seoul to New York, from Sydney to Hamburg. With his prize money and earnings, Paul and Julianne were finally able to escape debt. They paid off the £30,000 they owed. They used the money wisely, as Paul told Metro. A lot of it went on debts, because we were quite a long way in debt. Some of it went to the tax man. Obviously, we bought a house, but that's an investment in itself. We don't really splash that much. It's not our way. They sold their cramped house for £60,000 and bought an Art Deco mansion overlooking Swansea Bay in Port Talbot, Wales, for £450,000. For the first time in years, they could breathe. But Paul never forgot where he came from. In 2009, he released his second album, Passione, which reached #5 in the UK charts. In 2010 came Cinema Paradiso, his homage to film music. In 2013, he released a greatest hits collection. By 2014, he released Home, followed by On Stage in 2017 to celebrate 10 years since his historic Britain's Got Talent win. Winter Dreams arrived in 2018, and in 2022, Paul released Musica Non Proibita, a remarkable double album featuring 41 areas that he performed during lockdown. The album was dedicated to essential workers and those suffering during the COVID-19 pandemic. 7 studio albums in 15 years, each one a testament to Paul's enduring talent and work ethic. In 2013, something extraordinary happened. The Weinstein Company approached Paul about creating a biographical film about his life. The resulting movie, titled One Chance, starred British comedian and actor James Corden as Paul. Directed by David Frankel and written by Justin Zackham, the film was screened at the 2013 Toronto International Film Festival. Director David Frankel described it perfectly, saying it was the Rocky story, a tale of adversity and love. Most people, he explained, were not aware of the full extent of the suffering Paul had endured, but it was also a love story about a guy with no confidence who meets a woman who believes in him. The film brought Paul's inspiring story to an even wider audience, cementing his place in popular culture. But Paul's journey wasn't finished. In 2019, he did something that shocked many people. He returned to the talent show stage. Paul competed on America's Got Talent: The Champions, a competition bringing together winners and standout acts from Got Talent franchises around the world. Standing on that stage again made Paul visibly anxious. Simon Cowell, now judging the American version, admitted Paul looked shaky, saying he wasn't sure how it was going to go. But when Paul performed Nessun Dorma in the finals, dedicating it to Season 3 America's Got Talent winner Neil E. Boyd, who had passed away in 2018, he received standing ovations from all 4 judges: Simon Cowell, Howie Mandel, Mel B., and Heidi Klum. Paul made it all the way to the grand final, finishing in 12th place out of 50 acts from around the world. It was a remarkable achievement, proving his talent remained as powerful as ever.